Microphone was muted. What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another surprise special episode of Second Guessing with Stressin. This time, I am joined by Texans insider Aaron Wilson, who is joining us live from Kansas City. He is not on video, but on audio. Aaron, thank you and welcome joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, yeah, appreciate it. I'm not sure if you're in a dead spot or not, but you're kind of breaking up just a little bit.
I'm in my host side, but let's see. Does that sound any better?
Yes, I can hear you better now. Yes, sir. So yeah, I guess I'll start off. I mean, thanks for joining us. You've been busy traveling, and then we had a delay start to this because some news just broke, and you're a busy man. You had to get your info out there and articles. Do you want to touch on the moves that were just made by the Texans?
Yeah, let's start with the injury report. That's probably of the most interest to everyone. Reported yesterday, and others reported, and I'm reiterating, Joe Mixon and Azeez Al-Shaair are both expected to play against the Chiefs. Not soccer. There was never a high degree of concern about either player's status around the team. I think one of the issues that happens, and this tends to happen with fans and media, is the misunderstanding of the word questionable. It just sounds a little more ominous than it really is. A lot of questionable players play every week, but they're listed as questionable. Why does the NFL do it this way? Probably to create doubt and create interest as well, from a bigger picture standpoint. It's supposed to be a 50-50 shot. Generally, it's not 50-50. Generally, it's more, yes, this guy's going to play. Does it ever go a different way? Sure. Every situation, every injury you track is different. In this case, with Joe Mixon, they have a little bit of an insurance policy. They did elevate J.J. Taylor. They'll have him in reserve. And, yeah, can we predict if he'll aggravate his injury, be limited at all? We'll see. He looked good, as you saw the video from my colleague Chancellor Johnson at the send-off pep rally for the Texans. Looked like he's not limping, and that was my understanding of him around the building. And yeah, it wasn't a big time ankle injury. So yeah, guys get hurt playing football sometimes. With Azeez, you saw him miss only one play against the Chargers, played the entire game. So why would you go from practicing in the week and finishing the game to not playing? So I don't know. I don't know exactly how to rate it as far as level of concern. Maybe, people get a little paranoid, a little scared, worry about these things, obsess about them, slash. But yeah, this is not like a big story in my opinion. It just gets magnified because it's the playoffs and it's Joe Mixon. But yeah, Joe should be fine. I'm expecting Azeez to start next to Henry To'oTo'o, and Christian Harris will back those guys up and probably have a similar role to the last game. A lot of that's because he missed so much time. First with the calf injury, and then the latest injury, the ankle. He's off the injury report, but he's somewhat rusty, missed time. He's allowed a lot of completions. I think it's 11 catches on 12 targets. So some of it's just a football decision they're making, not because his ankle is so bad. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah, just we'll go through anything you want to talk about.
Okay, yeah, so I'll just kind of get some dialogue, and anyone in the chat, feel free to ask questions along the way, and I'll interject for Aaron to answer. But I think you're right when you mention, like the concerns about the injury report. I think it's heightened because it's the playoffs, and maybe it's overdone. But it sounds like both of those injuries from both Azeez and Joe Mixon were just lingering injuries as opposed to new re-aggravated injuries, and it's more of like a maintenance rest type thing. Is that your take?
Well, with Joe, yeah, something it did bother him with practice. So that's why he had the limited practice and then a day off from practice. So the idea was to get him off of it a little bit and for it to feel better. But they don't have any concern about him playing in the game. How good he's going to be. I can't speak to that. I haven't talked to Joe since earlier in the week, so I haven't had firsthand conversation at all. But I would expect Joe tough as he is, there just never was a concern that he would miss the game. We'll try to gauge how's he moving and all of those things in the warm-ups and, once he starts carrying the football. But I expect him to be ready for the playoff game. That's the expectation from everyone around the team. And, having Taylor up, well, just in case. And he can help them in some ways. But, yeah, no, I'm not expecting, like, all of a sudden Damian Pierce to play a lot other than kick returns and maybe, if they want to mix in a series for him. Sometimes they do that and just kind of see the tenor of the game, how it's going. But, no, I'm not expecting any real big changes to the lineup at all. Probably the biggest injury is Robert Woods, and they still had Robert on the trip. I've seen him do this before where he didn't practice and then he was able to play. I've also seen him not be able to play, like the Colts regular season finale last year when hip injury, very similar to this one, did sideline him. They're thin at wide receiver if you look at any position. And, of course, they jettisoned Deontay Johnson at his request after he sulked after the game, was highly upset. We watched him complaining about the role, and now he's a Raven again procedurally because they're just going to try to get a comp pick out of it. And he won't obviously play for the Ravens again, just like he won't play for the Texans again, or the Panthers again, or the Steelers again. So he's got about 4
So
of
you said that was
teams.
at his request?
Yeah, sources tell me that he requested to be released, and whether they would have done it anyway, quite possibly, but he wanted out.
So there maybe is some confusion. Like, I guess, the perception from me, from a fan's perspective, is, oh, he just threw a fit and he was a cancer, so we cut him. But, like, maybe that was part of it, but it was also both sides kind of wanted to end the marriage,
It's
I guess.
mutual, yes.
Wow.
He
Okay.
thought that he was going to have an increased role in the postseason. I think he was going off literally some of DeMeco Ryan's comments and whatever misunderstanding or assumption on his part about what that role would be. And obviously, game plans are fluid. He caught a pass. He also showed up, and this is another factor, and this hasn't been, I think, said much. It was noticed that he was kind of showing up the quarterback and waving his hand and I'm open, that kind of thing. And he's been here a couple weeks, and you don't see that with other players. It just came off as unprofessional.
Yeah, well, Nico Collins, a top 3 receiver in the league, in my opinion, didn't get a target for the whole quarter and a half and didn't say a word, So I guess that's to kind of juxtapose that. But yeah, I'll get a couple questions while we got people in here. Thank y'all for tuning in. On just X and YouTube, we have 670 live. We also have several others on other platforms. So if y'all don't already, on the ticker below, I have Aaron Wilson's information to follow him on Twitter and Instagram. And I know something that he's really trying to grow is his YouTube. It's also on there as well. If you could subscribe to him, I think he would appreciate that.
Thank you.
First off, we got Mr. Optimistic. He says, should we expect the same O-line this week?
They had both guys at right guard during practice, G. Scruggs and Shaq Mason. So they're making a decision still on probably communicating. They probably already made the decision, but as far as how they're going forward, is it going to be Mason getting his job back? If they view him as healthy, he missed 4 weeks with a grade 2 sprained MCL, or Scruggs. Other than that, no changes. But you're either staying with Scruggs or you're going back to Mason. That's the only change that's possible. And how did Mason look in practice? I thought he looked fine. Both guys moved well. They were able to practice, and based on what I saw, what I've heard, they both look fine in practice. So it'll be one of those guys that'll be the change. And I have not reported yet. I've only reported that they split the reps in practice. So they're evaluating what's the best 5 they can put out there. With Mason, lots of playoff experience under the big contract. Season's been a bit up and down. He's coming off an injury. If healthy, wouldn't shock me if they went back to him. Just like it wouldn't shock me if they stuck with Scruggs for continuity, but it's not like Scruggs has played a ton of guard, and he's not been a world beater out there. He's been solid. Solid's probably the way I would describe how he's played since he got back in the lineup.
Do you prefer one over the other, or is it pretty much a coin flip for you?
Prefer is an interesting word. Like, I'm pretty, what's the word? I'm very neutral. Like,
Yeah.
as far as what I think they should do, I would probably go back to Mason because I think that he's going to help them with stunts and things like that. He's played a lot of football. I would probably go with the more experienced player in the playoffs, but you could make an argument either way. But I would lean toward Mason.
Interesting. I think at the very least, getting a veteran O lineman back healthy is not a bad thing. I think getting more depth at the least is definitely a good thing. But I guess we'll definitely stay tuned on that. Dime says we just need the D line to show up and everything will fall in place. And then we got Mario Master says, any chance of seeing Robert Woods? You kind of touched on that. So that, I guess that kind of sounds like a 50-50 thing, like you mentioned.
Game time decision.
Game time decision. Okay.
Yep. Game
And
time
then,
decision is what I'm hearing.
TJ says, glad to hear Mixon is good to go. I think people were concerned because it was reported that he injured it in practice. So maybe there was some false information out there. And I guess we know the way the world works today, things kind of catch wind falsely too quickly sometimes. And then
Absolutely. I mean, people are, very paranoid. I think it's like the way I am, where this is a job and a profession, and I'm doing it from a journalism standpoint. Short because they have that passion. They're highly emotional about the ups and downs of their team. I don't really ride any role to give you guys the right information, and if that upsets someone or makes them happy, either way, that's not really for me. I mean, I'm not a robot, but what I've seen over the years is type of personality and, not getting super caught up. What's the story? It's more about just, doing the job, getting, and that's the approach I try to take. And, I think big story, great. It's, all the stories are important. They were signing someone to a trade. Try to a little bit.
Aaron, it seems like you're starting to break up again. I don't know if you can try and find a better spot. It's kind of in and out. But
Yeah. How about
I
now?
heard most of what you're saying. Aaron was basically saying the way he reports is he tries to be factual and not use emotion. And, and that's something that we need is like a neutral, unbiased reporter. And I think you definitely do a good job of that. But yeah, so Dime in the comments. Okay, yeah, it sounds like we can hear you better too now. But yeah, Dime in the comments says, Aaron, do you think we'll see any more Christian Harris? So you mentioned that, but you brought up a good point. I guess I can kind of coattail off of that. With Christian Harris, I think you bring up a good point in the fact that, you think that he will be basically the backup for Aziz and/or Henry. Like the last game, I believe he only played 7 snaps. And you alluded to the fact that maybe he's not 100%. And then also maybe he hasn't been playing as good as we expected. That was something I tried to, remind people of. Like all year we were waiting for his return, and we just assumed if and when he does return, he'll be playing at this elite level that he was at the end of last year. So I guess if you want to reiterate, how much he'll be involved, and do you think that maybe there's a special game plan? Like if we, like last year in the playoffs against the Ravens, we deployed him as a spy against Lamar Jackson, which worked in the first half. Could we see something like that?
I haven't heard if I did, I'll be able to really, like a game plan or something like that, or
Yeah,
just
it
like
seems we kind of got you in a bad spot
Yeah.
again. I'm not sure if you're able to try and.
I'll try to move around some. Yeah,
I'm making you get your cardio in.
Yeah. I'm
I
on
think
the
it's
8th floor
maybe
of the Marriott.
KC doesn't want
Can you
us
hear
to
me now?
have a good interaction. Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, sir.
Okay. As soon as I got the spot in my room, I'm just, for those that are wondering, I am here early this morning, and I've been working on articles. I'm just kind of holed up in my hotel out by the airport area. I'm just and I guess I don't have great phone reception. Hopefully, I sound a little bit better now. To recap
You
on
sound
Christian
great right
Harris,
now.
okay, he's off the injury report, but he had accumulated a lot of rust with the calf injury that he aggravated back in training camp. So he's injured it twice, and then he hurt his ankle. The ankle injury is newer, and it caused him to miss the final game of the season for precautionary reasons. And then he got back out there for the playoff game. They've limited his role. And when he's played, he has been picked on a bit in pass coverage. So they've thrown at him 12 times. He's allowed 11 catches, not the percentage you want from a linebacker. So, yeah, Christian, great player, great athlete. And they are mostly using two linebacker sets. That's another aspect of his playing time because they're third nickel of the year after Jimmy Ward, Jalen Petrie injuries out for the season. So they're, when you use only two linebackers, you don't need, a third when you have the nickel spot. So that's kind of the reason for his playing time or lack thereof.
Yeah, and I guess it could be just matchup opponent based. Like if you're playing the Chargers, a hardball offense that's heavy personnel, maybe there's not as much of a need for. I mean, I guess or if they run more 11 personnel, I guess it probably depends on the opponent too a bit. We got another good question from Mario Master, and I guess this can be a broader question that I can elaborate on. Right before we started, there was a couple transactions made. Tegan Quintariano did not make it. He's out. And then we had JJ Taylor was elevated, as well as Andrew Beck. Can you expand upon those moves that were made?
Right. Yeah. With Andrew, they needed to get another blocker out there, and he has the flexibility to play fullback or be a inline tight end. So that's why Andrew's up, because Kate Stover is on injured reserve. He broke his collarbone. He's undergoing surgery to repair that damage he suffered in the last game. But it's a loss. He got 4 passes. I thought he was a good start to the playoffs for the rookie from Ohio State. Purely depth and has some ability to return, or whether they would, have him do that on this short notice, do not know. But maybe Xavier Hutchinson, if Woods can't go, they have a little bit of flexibility with some of these guys that have practice returns all year. And unfortunately, Tank's out for the year. You don't have even Deontay Johnson, who had one of the punt returns against the Titans, didn't get any yards, but caught the punt. And yeah, hopefully Woods can go. He is a game time decision.
To me, it's kind of peculiar or funny, I guess. Robert Woods is someone that has been kind of looked over and underappreciated by fans, including myself at times. And now here we are in a position, desperately hoping that he's available for, mainly because of his veteran, reliability in the punt return, like you mentioned, and also as a receiver. So I definitely hope he can play. And then I'm just thinking now too, like if you look at the punt return position now as opposed to last year, Sims returned a kick at the divisional round last year. And now we're just hoping for a guy that can catch the ball without fumbling it. So that'll be an interesting development for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Toddy
Stevens.
Philly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Toddy
You got
Philly says
another
he
question.
says big game from Schultz. Do you think he asked? Do you think Schultz will have a big game?
I don't know. I mean, it hasn't happened, right? This whole season, so it's hard to say. Well, all of a sudden now that Dalton's going to step up. Almost everything we've talked about when it comes to the complimentary. I did an article about this about Nico Collins and what are we seeing from the guys. We kind of have to go off the facts. And John Mechie the third, he lost a fumble. He was targeted a bunch of times. Didn't have a lot of production. Dalton Schultz, same thing. Xavier Hutchinson, I would be more inclined to give him more opportunities after the 34-yard catch. I feel like he, at times, has stepped up. I don't anticipate a lot of throws for Jared Wayne. I think he'll be special teams. But, I would be surprised if all of a sudden he's in the offense. I think Nico's going to have 10 targets, at least.
I like that. I mean, I almost have a theory to where, I mean, I don't like mean this fully, but like in my opinion, a lot of the struggles on offense from Bobby is because it seems like things are too complicated. So in a way, this is also maybe kind of good where he's forced to simplify things and dumb it down. And to your point, like force feed Nico. I know they can double cover, but I mean, maybe there's a little bit of that element too. I don't know what you think on that, but
Well, I think that there's an element of lack of personnel, and the offense has had to be sort of, for lack of a better word, dumbed down a bit, simplified. When you don't have Stephon Diggs, you don't have Tank Dell, so you're a heavy centric Joe Mixon, Nico Collins touches offense, and they've had to do that. One of the reasons that they had to do so many screens, and Bobby couldn't say this because it would be dunking on the offensive line, but it was because they couldn't run block effectively enough. So he was trying to create some short plays in space with screens. They don't block well for screens, unfortunately, and they just lack timing. And I don't think it's one of CJ's best plays. He throws a lot of good balls. I don't know if that's necessarily his best thing or the receivers are that good at it. So ultimately, I mean, you got to go with what works. And it became a real exercise in futility and frustration when they were running those screens the last time they played the Chiefs.
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it was a former Texans O lineman. The name is fleeting my mind right now, but he brought up your point. We were all frustrated with the screens, but I mean, and Bobby mentioned it too. Like we were very effective at running them most of the year, and then the reason it seems like he did it is a substitute for the run game, like you mentioned. So I mean, it's tough to watch, but I mean, that could be something that we might see again in this game. And it's tough when your hands are tied as an OC.
Right. If you're not, getting a hat on Chris Stone Cold Jones or Charles Omenihu or George Karlaftis, and those guys are just busting into the backfield and teeing off on Joe, then you got to come up with something else. So the hope is, I mean, Joe ran, he was off to a good game, and then, they just kind of stopped running, which is another pattern, but I believe it was 57 on 14 carries. So he was on his way possibly to a 100-yard game if he had, got enough carries. He just
Yeah.
needed really to break at least one big run. Joe, it's not like the Chiefs, I mean, they're a good defense and they're very well schemed. The scheme is probably more formidable than the personnel that Spagnuolo comes up with, and including, you probably seen this clip, Brian Baldinger, I thought, who does a really nice job of his videos and breakdowns of plays, former NFL offensive line, is now working for the NFL Network as an analyst. I've talked to Brian a lot of times, especially on offensive line play, but he's good at other things too. And he was watching the split high and the interception that CJ threw in the first game against Kansas City, and how they were using coverage and a little bit of disguise to cut off the passing lanes. And they did a nice job with that. That's Kansas City. He threw a couple of picks. Obviously, one of the biggest things in this game, taking care of the football, running the ball, and stopping the run. They do a lot of these things, and they'll have a chance to be in this game and be competitive and perhaps win it and beat the top seeded 15-2 defending champs. Uh, you know, make these mistakes, throw the picks, all those things. Your chances of winning, they go way down.
Yep. Well, I know you got to go here in about 5 or 10 minutes. So I'll just do a couple more questions.
Sure.
Can you provide us any intel on the injury report on the other side? I know they have a couple. Like we've mentioned that we have players back that didn't play last time, like Aziz Alshire, our Mike linebacker, play caller on defense, fully fought
I've
Akasi,
heard,
who's very under.
yeah, I've heard, and others have reported too, is that they're going to go with DJ Humphries at left tackle. So they'll have Humphries, and I guess Thuney would play guard. So we'll see how they actually line up, but apparently that's on the table to do that. So having Humphries back, he's a talented lineman. We'll see how they go forward, but
I do
that's what's
believe
been out
earlier
there.
today that Jordan Schultz reported that Tooney would be playing at left tackle. I believe it was from Schultz, but I don't know if
Okay,
that's
I saw someone else
100%.
say. I saw someone else say that it was going to be Humphrey, but it was someone out of Kansas City. Maybe that's not the latest information. I don't know, but I'm not super close to whatever they're doing with their injury report or lineup. But yeah, I think Humphrey's probably the better left tackle, but maybe they just feel more comfortable with Thuney because he's played there a lot, even though Thuney's a natural guard.
Yeah, and then they also, so we talk about we're getting Aziz Alshire and Foley Fatukasi, who in my opinion is a very underrated piece on that defense. He's our big run stopper. We saw that in the Chargers game. But they're also getting Hollywood Brown back on offense as well as
That's
Jalen
right.
Watson, a starting corner. So I guess if you want to kind of expand on that a little bit.
Well, yeah, Jalen is a talented outside corner, and no, Steven Nelson will not be elevated for the practice squad. They're not going to need Steve for this game, but yeah, they have Watson, and they're excited about him and feel like he does a good job. And then having Hollywood Brown, that's kind of been in the cards for a while that Hollywood would be able to have a role for this game. So they have a lot of targets. They've got him, they've got DeAndre Hopkins, they got Travis Kelce, they've got Xavier Worthy, who has improved his game, I think, a lot and gotten to be a better target. His speed is a big factor. And I think it's just a team where, looking at everything that's happened with them, I think they're a tough matchup. It's a matchup game. There's no one that's dominant, but there's lots of good out there. A lot of good players.
Yeah, and to your point earlier about Spagnuolo, you said it wasn't like elite personnel, but it's an elite scheme. I would say it's almost the same thing on offense, aside from Pat Mahomes, obviously. But I mean, I don't think they have elite personnel on offense, but it's just an elite scheme by Andy Reid. You see, they run a lot of these pick plays and screens and motion to get mismatches. It's a lot of outsmarting you. I mean, do you think that's the
Yep.
case with the offense as well?
Great coaching, and Andy always changes his game plan. And Andy has had so much success at this stage in the divisional round, just like Patrick Mahomes. They've been perfect in this round with Pat in terms of touchdowns and interceptions and wins. So it is a great scheme, and no one works harder than Andy. Andy's there at 3, 4 in the morning, arriving to get to work at Arrowhead and start drawing stuff up. And he's had a lot of trial and error. He wasn't a great game manager, if you remember, way back in the day with the Eagles, and he worked at it. He got better. He's always like trying to get better as a coach, trying to learn. And I think it's that thirst for knowledge and passion for the game and smarts. He's intelligent, and he's anybody ever gets a chance to talk to him, you're struck by how smart he is, and he's a good guy. And there's a lot of mutual respect between him and D'Amico Ryans. Shared a quote that he had in a Kansas City press conference the other day, and these guys. These are outstanding coaches. D'Amico's at the start of his runway, and Andy's toward the end. And to try to knock off a guy that he used to play for in Philly, be a cool story. The younger coach against one of the best coaches to ever put on a headset, including the Bill Belichick's and all the greats, the Chuck Knowles, all those guys, the John Maddens. Andy Reid belongs. This is a Hall of Fame coach.
I agree 100%. We get so enamored in Mahomes, but I mean, you have to remember that a big part of this is from Andy Reid, and in your opinion and my opinion, one of the best of all time. So we definitely will have our hands full. I guess I'll part off with one more question. Since you
Yep.
are in Kansas City, can you give us a boots on the ground report of atmosphere, environment, weather, and what you expect it to be like tomorrow?
Right. On my flight, we did have a decent amount of Texans fans. They're a little quiet, a little subdued. It was early in the morning. We boarded at 6 a.m. to Dallas, then connected Dallas to Kansas City. Saw a lot of families, saw a lot of people are excited to go to a playoff game. When you get to their airport, obviously you see mostly people in Chiefs gear, and they're selling it at the airport. And it is nice and clear and moderate temperatures right now. It's been about 43 to 48 and sunny, so it didn't feel too bad. It felt a little bit like what we're have most of the time in Houston, but it's going to dip overnight, and we're going to be in the 20s tomorrow. So it's going to be very, very cold, and I think it's going to be I think last game it was about 30 degrees at kickoff, and it'll be a little bit colder than that for this one, but it won't be that different. It's not going to be like the Dolphins game where we're hearing about frostbite and amputations and things like that. It's going to be cold.
Patrick Mahomes'
Cold.
helmet cracking happened in that game as well, right?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. A cold, crisp game. I think it's going to be cloudy, but no precipitation predicted. Putting on my Justin Stapleton weatherman hat here and done a few weather articles this week. I anticipate, clear conditions in terms of precipitation and field that's clean, not sloppy, but cold. Absolutely. And everybody will
And
tell you
so
this if they ever played football. It hurts more when you get hit in the cold. It's painful.
that
No matter
that
what
is
kind of
true.
adrenaline you got, you're going to feel it. But both
And last
sides
time
play
we
the same.
played, what was the weather last time? Was it going to be very similar to maybe a little bit colder?
It was 30 degrees. I went and looked up and I was out there for an hour or longer during pregame, and I thought it was very cold and it was very windy, and the wind chill was a factor too. We're looking at potentially 5 to 10 degrees less is the forecast for around kickoff time, and it could be worse.
So that was a very valuable experience. Just less than a month ago, we were played in similar conditions, and for the first time, in my opinion, with the young D'Amico Ryan's team, we actually fared well.
They did. They handled the cold well. I think CJ's record is 2-2 in games where it's below 45 degrees. It's on a Saturday. We played a lot of cold weather at Ohio State. I don't think it really affects your quarterback, and they have a lot of players from up north that played in the Big Ten Conference and other schools in the East. So yeah, I don't think it's gonna be a big factor.
Yeah, well,
But
it
we'll
definitely
see.
will be, and hopefully, we handle it well. Again, I just want to thank you, Aaron, as we wrap up here. If y'all don't, please follow Aaron on all social media, X, Instagram, and his YouTube, which is he's trying to grow. Same for myself. If you follow us on one of those platforms and you have the other ones but aren't active, just feel free to do it and subscribe anyways. It'll really help. I'll be reposting this on YouTube as well as on my podcast, so be on the lookout for that. And as always, feel free to check out my website, houstonstressens.com. I have a free newsletter. I write articles, and I wrote a preview of a breakdown today. And also check out Aaron and his work. I mean, he's with KPRC too. He's on TV. He writes articles. He's breaking news. I mean, he does it all. We're very thankful for you, Aaron, and all the hard work that you do. And
Thank
go
you very much.
Texans.
Absolutely. You're welcome. And yeah, thanks for having me, and enjoyed it. And yeah, enjoy the game.
Oh, and hopefully, if we get a win, maybe this can be a weekly recurring thing. I know the fans really enjoyed the insight.
Let's
No
run
one
it back.
knows the team as good as you. So
Thank you. Yeah, let's run it back. We'll do it again.
awesome. Sounds good, Aaron. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.